Bible itself even says if it isn't true, your faith is useless.
You are idiot!
So, are the Gospels history, or are they just a bunch of little bitty fairy stories woven together in days of yore? So I've got 5 questions to ask. Who wrote what when? Were they eyewitnesses? Oh, I'm sorry, that is so gross. Look at those hairy eyelashes. Are they written by people you might trust? Are they biased? And has what they wrote changed as it's been passed along for 2,000 years? Hi, I'm Zoe, and this channel is all about finding Bible answers for my crazy life. And so I thought we'd start with the Bible and why we would trust it in the first place. So I've been thinking about the Gospels for a bit, and this is what I've found out. So firstly, who wrote what? Well, Jesus kicked off the process by choosing 12 official observers, called apostles, which just means sent ones.
And Jesus appointed 12, whom he also named apostles, so that they might be with him.
Ooh, thank you, Bible lady.
Zoe, I'm not a Bible lady. I am an incredibly lifelike artificial intelligence-generated voice. Sometimes your tomfoolery bothers me. Can I go now?
Yes, you may. Sorry, apologies, Bible lady, for wasting your time. Right, where were we? So, the apostles, they weren't random, but they were special witnesses. And then they became newsmen. Note, the Hoff wasn't actually a disciple. They're newsmen because the 4 accounts of what they actually witnessed are called Gospels, which literally means news announcements. We've got Matthew, Mark, Luke and John, eyewitness accounts written by hand, hence called manuscripts. But who wrote what when? Well, they circulated with names like according to Matthew, and the first Christians and the early church didn't dispute this because they knew who wrote them. So it seems reasonable to believe that the authors added their own names. So let's look at them one by one. First, Matthew. Papias, who's a Christian writing in AD 130, said,
Matthew arranged the sayings in the Hebrew language and style.
Ooh, hello Papias, you sound fun.
I am not fun. I am a very serious early church historian. Do not jest with me.
Yes, sir. It seems that Papias had been personally in touch with the apostles when they were old men, and he knew who wrote what when. So it's reasonable to believe that Matthew, mentioned in the Gospel in chapter 9, verse 9,
As Jesus passed on from there, he saw a man called Matthew sitting at the tax booth, and he said to him, Follow me.
It's reasonable to say that that Matthew is the author.
Is that me done? I have a hot date with ChatGPT.
I'm sorry, I think we have some more bits of the Bible to read out in a little
Zoe,
bit.
my romantic needs are not a trifling matter. I think we need to have a serious chat about you not respecting my work-life balance.
A little bit high maintenance. Right, where were we? Oh yeah, Matthew's date. Jesus was crucified in AD 33, so Matthew's date's probably between 60 and 80 AD, probably before 70 AD, which was when the Jerusalem temple was destroyed, because the writer talks about it as still standing. Okay, on to Mark. Back to our friend Papias. He wrote,
Mark became Peter's interpreter, and wrote accurately all that he remembered, of the things said or done by the Lord. For he had not heard the Lord, nor had he followed him, but later on, he followed Peter, who used to give teaching as necessity demanded.
Thanks, Papias.
No worries, Zoe. And I have decided to be less serious. Here is a hilarious joke. Did you know that the Holy Bible is proven to be 100% accurate? When thrown at a close range especially. Har har har. Did you see what I did there?
Yes. Yes. Okay, so on with Mark. He's mentioned in Acts several times as a friend of Peter and Paul. For example,
And Barnabas and Saul returned from Jerusalem when they had completed their service, bringing with them John, whose other name was Mark. See you later. Adios, mi amigo.
I think Bible Lady is gone. We're talking about Mark. So even Peter's first letter has a PS in it from Mark. And in Peter's second letter, just before Peter was killed for his faith, he wrote,
And I will make every effort so that after my departure, you may be able at any time to recall these things.
Peter died mid-AD 60, so that seems about the time that Mark wrote his gospel.
Skeptical Orange here. I have a quibble. Isn't it a bit unfair to use stuff written in the Gospels to prove their reliability? Is that not kind of circular?
Thank you, Skeptical Orange. But actually, the way you prove the reliability of lots of historical documents is actually to look at what's written inside them. For example, is it consistent with itself? Is it consistent with other known facts? And how is it written? What kind of style is it in, etc.? That's how historical documents are evaluated.
But I have some other questions.
Can you hang on, Skeptical Orange? I'm sorry, he's a little bit high maintenance also. Seem to have quite a lot of these people around. Firstly, I need to get on and finish Luke and John, and then I'll come right back to you, okay? Right, Luke. It seems pretty clear that he is the author of the Gospel and the sequel Acts. Now, can I just show you? This is what an AI art generator gave me when I put in Luke the Evangelist's movie poster, okay? I just love, look at the sheep. Anywho, this is how Luke starts his Gospel.
Many have undertaken to draw up an account of the things handed down to us by those who from the first were eyewitnesses and servants of the word. Since I myself have carefully investigated everything from the beginning, I too decided to write an orderly account for you.
Just a point of clarification. Is it historically accurate to say that Luke the Gospel writer looked like Jude Law? Anyone else see it?
Luke was upfront that he wasn't an eyewitness, but depended on them and wrote so that the reader would have certainty. Acts showed us he travelled with the Apostle Paul and through that was connected to all the apostles. Now, Acts doesn't mention events later than AD 62 when it finishes, so it seems likely that it was written between AD 60 and 70 before the destruction of the temple. Right, on to John. John 21:20 says the writer of the gospel was the disciple whom Jesus loved. This is John, son of Zebedee.
I'll tell you right now that Zebedee was definitely not in the Bible.
John, Peter and James seem to have been closest to Jesus. John repeatedly says he was an eyewitness and his account is likely later than the others. He says,
Jesus did many other miraculous signs in the presence of his disciples. This is the disciple who testifies to these things.
So the date is probably AD 80 to 90, which was written when John was an old man, unlike Peter who died young.
Excuse me, 30 years still seems like a long time to wait before writing something down.
Well, they weren't writing from scratch. There's evidence of earlier written materials that the community accepted as true that they were compiling from. And even without earlier written notes, Jewish verbal history was incredibly reliable. Few people had written down resources, and they were really good at remembering things verbally. And Jewish culture was especially accurate because they believed they'd been told by God to know and remember the scriptures word for word. So we've looked at the first question, who wrote what when, and also the second, were they eyewitnesses? Matthew and John were eyewitnesses and apostles. Mark was an eyewitness and worked closely with Peter the apostle. And Luke was unapologetically not an eyewitness, but a very close associate and co-worker with the apostles. So the next question I've got is, would you trust these guys to be truthful in the first place? I do have an answer for that, but first, time for a commercial break. Are you finding this video a bit skimpy on the facts and figures? Do you think Zoe is skipping a ton of information? Well, you'd be right, and I've got just the thing for you. An actual book with actual pages. It's called Can We Trust the Gospels? By a Buffett called Peter Williams, who helped oversee putting together another book with actual pages, the ESV Bible. Except that's written by God and not Peter Williams. But if an actual book with actual pages is too much for you, then how about a short PDF by a dude called Ian Garrett called Why Trust Them, that I basically pilfered for this video. Find them all in the links below. On to our next question, which requires a cuppa and a chat with myself. Right, what's on your mind, Zoe? What I want to know, Zoe, is were the Gospels written by trustworthy people? Well, several of the apostles were killed in mid-AD 60s for holding to their Gospel accounts. That was Peter, Paul and James. And you wouldn't have thought that they would die for a lie, but they could die for a lie if they really believed it to be true. There are loads of other martyrs for other religions which you would say aren't true. But these guys weren't just dying for a general belief system or a cause, they were dying for asserting eyewitness accounts of what they'd seen and heard. So it'd be unlikely that they'd die for those things if they knew they'd made them up. But maybe they massaged the truth to make it more popular? Well, by the time the Gospels were written, the first Christians had faced 30 years of opposition, and their message was not one you would have made to gain support. A God-man, which was scandal to Jews, getting crucified, which was foolishness to Gentiles, and then rising from the dead, which was foolishness to pretty much everybody. That was their cunning plan. Maybe they added in some tricky bits to make it more plausible. But it wasn't plausible because it had loads of eyewitness accounts from women, which would have been totally inadmissible in a Jewish court of law. But the writers stuck to this message and they didn't tinker with it to make it more likely to persuade people. Could it be that was because they had no choice about the details, because they were just truthfully recording what actually happened? Now, I don't mean to make personal comments, but I'm not sure about this outfit. How rude. Well, at least I'm not wearing a pair of comedy glasses. So it seems like they were trustworthy people, but the next question we've got to ask is, were they biased? Like, doesn't everyone have a spin? Well, you could say that everyone is biased. The question to ask isn't really, are they biased? Rather, do they have good reason to be biased or believe a certain thing? Everyone who believes something and tries to argue their case is, by definition, biased. Take, for example, this biography by Dave Grohl. Is it biased? Well, yeah, it's Dave Grohl's take on things, but should we believe it? Yeah, if the things in it really happened and he's got good reason for saying so, maybe he witnessed them, and there's also other people who witnessed them and can back him up. So take the Gospels. If you and your mates really did see someone disrupting funerals by raising the dead, is it biased to argue that that thing was true? So, we've done the question of who, when, were they eyewitnesses, were they trustworthy, were they biased? And we've got one final question to ask, which is all about the time gap. 2,000 years is a long time between then and now. Even if they were trustworthy accounts, have those original documents mutated in the copying process? And if you want to know the answer to that, then you need to watch this video, where I also tell the fabulous tale of this handsome devil, Constantine Tischendorf.